and the Eyewitness News team. Now, Eyewitness News.
Tawana Brawley was not the victim of a forcible sexual assault by multiple assailants over a 4-day period. There's no evidence that any sexual assault occurred.
New York Attorney General Robert Abrams, for the first time and officially, calls the Tawana Brawley story a lie and closes the investigation that has commanded headlines filled with charges of racism. And perhaps most importantly, finally answers the haunting question of whether a gang of white men kidnapped and raped the then 15-year-old girl. Good evening. I'm John Johnson. Bill Butell is on assignment. John Mahler is here. Here are the developments in the Tawana Brawley case in brief. The grand jury report says there's no evidence to support the story that Tawana was abducted and raped last November. New York Attorney General Robert Abrams says that point by point the story is not true and that the Brawley advisors have jeopardized the rights of future victims of racial assaults. Tawana Brawley and her family have not been heard from, and no one is certain where she is. Reverend Al Sharpton and other advisors have reacted strongly to Abrams, attacking him as a racist and not caring about black victims. There is other reaction on the grand jury report, and we'll have those stories in just a minute. But first, Tim Minton has been covering the Brawley story for all these months. Tim was at the courthouse today in Poughkeepsie and when the grand jury report was released, and at the news conference held by State Attorney General Robert Abrams supporting the grand jury finding that the Tawana Brawley story is a lie. Tim is here now with his report. Tim.
John, it's not just my report. Of course, it's the grand jury's report. And when you read this report, it's hard to get past one page. That's the page where jurors prove that Tawana Brawley wrote racial slurs on herself and then smeared feces over the slurs. It's at the guts of Tawana's story. For months, her advisors have ridiculed anybody silly enough to suggest the filth found on Tawana was self-inflicted. Now, the jurors who spent months listening to all the evidence say just that and more. The Brawley report is tough, detailed, and blunt. On the key question of whether Tawana was raped, the grand jury says no. There was no medical or forensic evidence that a sexual assault was committed on Tawana Brawley.
If a 15-year-old girl had been forcibly raped or sodomized by multiple assailants over a 4-day period, there is a high probability that medical or forensic evidence would have been found.
What about that gang of white men, the alleged attackers? The grand jury says no. No gang, no men. And jurors point out, Tawana Brawley never provided a detailed account of her allegations or named her alleged assailants to anyone. As for the kidnap story, the report says no. It says the teenager actually stayed in a place she knew well. Jurors found Tawana Brawley had significant contact with her former apartment at some time during her 4-day disappearance.
Carpet fibers consistent with those from apartment 19A were found on the jeans, on the blouse, and the shoe Ms. Brawley was wearing when discovered on November 28. A burnt seam of denim and other charred cotton materials were scattered on the living room floor. The jeans Ms. Brawley was wearing were burned and had pieces missing, and there were pieces of charred cotton found with the bag in which Ms. Brawley was discovered.
Then there's the question, the Brawleys say it's the only question, of cover-up by officials. But the grand jury found no cover-up. The report says there is no evidence that a cover-up occurred or was attempted in this case.
Significant numbers of personnel were assigned to the investigation by the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office, as well as the Dutchess County District Attorney's Office. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was contacted by the Sheriff's Office while Tawana Brawley was still in St. Francis Hospital. The FBI was contacted based on the racial epithets on her body, even before she indicated that a white cop, quotes, was involved. All of the key evidence in the case was sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C.
But as to whether there was a cover-up by the Brawleys, the grand jury says yes.
It was alleged and indicated that Tawana Brawley was abducted, sexually abused, raped, sodomized over a 4-day period by 3 to 6 men, one of whom was a police officer. Those allegations are untrue. The people who made those allegations lied.
The Brawley report also deals with the people accused by Tawana's family and advisors. Was Stephen Pagones involved? Jurors say no. He had no connection with any incident involving Tawana Brawley during those 4 days. And about Fishkill officer Harry Crist Jr., who died shortly after Tawana was found, the report says no involvement. The death of Harry Crist Jr. was a suicide completely unrelated to Tawana Brawley. It took almost an hour for the special prosecutor to read the evidence, testimony, and conclusions of the grand jury. In the end, Robert Abrams said his greatest fear is for the next young girl, white or black, the real victim.
If a young woman were to walk into a police station, not only in New York, anywhere in this country, and make an accusation about being raped, or if a minority person were to make an accusation to law enforcement saying that they were preyed upon on the basis of race, and their allegation was not taken in the most serious way and investigated with the utmost degree of commitment, then that would be the most horrendous possible outcome of this kind of case.
But to protect against future hoaxes, the grand jury, in addition to its conclusion on the facts of the case, is also proposing several changes in state law designed to help law enforcement officials deal with future claims of rape and other crimes. But you can write to this address: the New York State Attorney General's Office, Public Information Office, 120 Broadway, New York, New York, 10271. It's a public record. Anybody can get one. They invite you to write for it. John.
Say is systemically prejudiced against blacks.
What should we expect from 21 whites from Dutchess County coming up with some conclusions when even John Santucci has made the comment about the New York City grand juries that people tend to vote their racial prejudices? So whatever they've come up with is what they've come up with. It is clear they never intended to arrest and prosecute those people who did this to Tawana Brawley.
When the three advisors were informed by reporters that Attorney General Abrams is asking the State Judicial Discipline Committee to investigate and discipline Mason and Alton Maddox for 10 months of deception, Maddox began calling Abrams names.
He is a mental midget. He's an absolute judicial punk, and he cannot face up to real men. And
although Abrams did not formally recommend action against the third advisor, he did say Reverend Al Sharpton is under investigation by his office and possibly that of U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani.
I don't think that anyone in their right mind can believe a girl plucked hair out of her head, covered herself with excrement, and did all these things because she was afraid of getting a beating. That just doesn't make any sense.
Late this afternoon, Giuliani commented on the grand jury report.
The Attorney General and his staff have done a very good job in investigating a case under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, including difficult personal circumstances. The personal attacks on him and members of his staff have been extraordinary and really at the level of being indecent. And despite that, they've handled it professionally, and they've done as good a job as you could do under the circumstances.
4-hour radio program, the Brawley advisors declined any comment. Apparently, they'll have more to say at a rally they planned for this evening. That rally to be aimed at the New York Times, the paper that leaked information about the grand jury report. Like everything else with the Brawley case, we will all just have to wait and see. In Midtown Manhattan, Art McFarlane, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Who appointed Abrams as special prosecutor said the false charges made by Brawley were deplorable, especially in light of the expense and anguish those charges caused.
Why would it take months and months and months?
As a practical matter, if the grand jury is dissolved and nothing else happens, it will be a virtual end to the prosecution.
In and around the area of America, civil rights has been seriously damaged. I think that Maddox and Mason, two of the most cynically evil characters to have ever operated or pretend to operate under civil rights banner. The Reverend Sharpton has done some good things in the past. I feel very bad for him that he allowed himself to be so deeply involved in a fraud.
It's no shock to anybody. Most people thought it was a fraud and a hoax, but were afraid to say it. I said it was a fraud about 6 months ago, and I'm proud of the fact that I had the courage to say it.
I think this is the biggest hoax that's ever been perpetrated on the American public at the expense of the taxpayers. This case has run into the millions, both federal, state, county, and local funds.
Comedian Bill Cosby, who originally offered a $25,000 reward for information in the Brawley case, says through a spokesman the reward still stands. According to the spokesman, Cosby still wants the truth.
PAGONES. He is a victim of the Brawley case. The assistant Dutchess County District Attorney was publicly accused of kidnapping and raping Brawley. He asked that the report be made public to clear his name. Kathy Wolf talked exclusively with PAGONES after the report came out.
Stephen PAGONES says it's been agonizing. This morning, a grand jury cleared him of any involvement in the Tawana Brawley affair. But what he's been feeling over the past 7 months does not make him want to celebrate.
I was angry, I was frustrated, I was upset, I was surprised. I could just go on for hours. You just can't believe what it's like. It's unbelievable.
When did you first find out that this whole thing was happening?
I found out, I think it was March 14th or 13th. It was on a Sunday, and I just started receiving phone calls. People were telling me, what'd you think about the press conference? And I had no idea what they were talking about. And later on that day, I discovered that they were talking about Maddox and how he had accused me publicly on TV.
They were accusations without foundation.
He has eyed Tawana Brawley before.
But they were accusations that would change his life. Before all of this happened, if anyone in this sleepy little town had ever heard of Stephen PAGONES, it was only because he was a Dutchess County prosecutor. Now his name has been in articles across the country, his face on the television sets in the living rooms of literally millions of homes, known in connection with the rape of Tawana Brawley. Throughout the case, Stephen PAGONES has maintained a friendly rapport with the press, which has recorded him every step of the way. He's put up with the strain it's put on his parents, his wife, his friends. He's received death threats and watched the Brawley advisors go public with lurid descriptions of his alleged involvement in the gang rape. This morning, Attorney General Robert Abrams meant to leave no doubt.
There is no forensic or other evidence that in any way connects Mr. PAGONES to any incident involving Tawana Brawley.
Do you think it'll ever really be completely over for you?
No. I think I'll always be tainted. I'm sure there's going to be people out there who will always wonder if I had something to do with this, or if maybe there was a cover-up, even in spite of the fact that Mr. Abrams and the grand jury has concluded that there's nothing to Tawana's story.
The young prosecutor plans to file a lawsuit against Brawley and her advisors, and he says he also plans to move, though he wouldn't say when or where. To many people, today's report is the last chapter of the Brawley story, but for Stephen PAGONES, it's far from over. In Wappingers Falls, I'm Kathy Wolf, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
I feel the grand jury came to this conclusion because that they wasn't getting any cooperation from the Tawana Brawley family.
I think the whole thing's been made up. I wish they would end it. I wish the Reverend Al Sharpton would get off of TV and out of the public eye and quit starting up the things that he's been starting.
I've dealt with rape cases. I've been an ex-officer, so forth, and it just dragged on so far.
I feel very sorry for her and all the people that may have been hurt.
I think it was a fair statement of the findings, and I think the only tragedy is it took them so long to arrive at that.